Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley, a podcast about making things up, making things happen. I love talking to creative people. Today, my guest is a returning champion. He's been on this podcast before a number of times. He is a filmmaker, and every time he makes a wonderful documentary, I have to interview him about it because I love his movies. He's Jeffrey Schwarz, a good friend of mine, and he has a new documentary out called Mineshaft, The Cruising Murders. It's playing at Outfest on July 25th at 6:15. It's about the movie Cruising and the controversy surrounding it, the 1980 film by William Friedkin starring Al Pacino, set in the gay netherworld of New York City. There's murder involved. It was very controversial at the time, and it still is. There were protests, but Jeffrey takes a look at the making of the film and the controversy and the history of it and the legacy of it, but he also dives into the real-life murders that inspired the film, and that's where the heart of his movie, I think, is, at least for me. The people that he talks to and the stories of the real people are very moving and very surprising. So I highly recommend you check out this movie at Outfest or wherever you get a chance to do it. And I was excited to talk to Jeffrey about it. But before we get to the interview, this podcast is brought to you by me. I do it. So if you want to support it, you can go to DennisAnyone.net and leave a tip in my virtual tip jar. Help me cover my expenses. I appreciate that. Also, I'm going to be part of this thing called the Live Love Podcast Cruise on February 7th to the 14th in 2027, Valentine's Day. We're going to Mexico with Derek and Romaine and some other fun people. And if you want to be on that boat with me, we'll probably do a podcast recording and some other shenanigans. Go to DNR Travel and book a cabin today. It's going to be a sausage fest. I don't know if it is. I don't know. It's going to be fun though. 3 ports in Mexico and good times. And the other thing is I have a Substack and a Patreon called Dennis Hensley's Happy and Gay. You can subscribe to that for free. I try to post at least once a month. It's gotten harder with my full-time job, but it's, a spinoff of this podcast with a little happiness nugget at the end. I'm really into that. Also, my play, Trade-Offs, it's not called The Point of Pinecones anymore. I'm going back to the original title. The other title didn't spark joy when I was trying to get people to come see it at the Fringe. We've been invited to be part of something called Beyond the Fringe. So the theater company where we do the show is called the Actors Company. They do a little mini festival after the Fringe. They invite back some of their shows, and we get to do 3 more shows, you guys. So the dates are Tuesday, the 21st of July at 7 p.m., and also Saturday, the 25th of July at 3:30 p.m., and then Sunday, August 2nd at 5 p.m. It's kind of random times, but you could come and see our show. I'm really proud of it. We're going to have some different actors in the mix because some people are out of town, but it's going to be great. It's called Trade-Offs. I'm going to post about it on my socials. My Instagram is Dennis C. Hensley at Instagram. So anyway, keep those dates in mind. I hope people come and see it. Yeah, enough of the plugs. Here's my interview with Jeffrey Schwarz. Joining me now via Zoom from Los Angeles, it's my friend Jeffrey Schwarz. He is a filmmaker. He makes wonderful documentaries, and his newest one is called Mineshaft, The Cruising Murders, and it's playing as part of Outfest Next on July 25th at 6:15, and I'm going to be there. Welcome to the podcast, Jeffrey.
Hi, Dennis. I'm so happy to be back. You've had me on your show, how many times? Several times. Countless times.
Well, I mean, we could count them, but we don't need to. So
one would be an honor enough, but to have me back so many times, well, I'm very grateful. So
you are a terrific filmmaker, and you always make films that are interesting to my crowd. You're telling the story of gay people in pop culture and other areas single-handedly. You're saving our legacy. No, but seriously, you tell stories that would otherwise fall through the cracks and not get people on camera talking about them. Like, do you see that as kind of a mission? Kind of like, oh, somebody's got to tell this story, and I guess it's going to be me, and I got to lock these people down before they pass away and the story disappears.
100%. I mean, you probably get a similar answer from most documentary filmmakers, but I tend to go for stories that I haven't heard before.
Right.
And if I get a whiff of it, I have to sort of follow it down this path and see where it goes. And then something just clicks in my head, and I just realize that this has to be a movie. And if I don't make it, it probably will never be made, and the story will just vanish. And for me, that would be a tragedy. Like nobody's banging down my door asking for these movies, but I make them. And I'm so grateful that people like you, and they've been so warmly received over the years, and we're playing, Outfest is such a sort of a coming home because I've played at Outfest before. And so, yes, absolutely. I do feel like these stories. I think Barbara Streisand's going to be okay. Her legacy is sealed. I don't need to sort of pursue her, unless she's listening and she'd like to work with me. But, I feel like it's the stories that are in danger of disappearing are the ones I'm most attracted to.
When it clicks and you're like, oh boy, there's a story here and I have to tell it. Is that a good feeling, or is it a little bit like, oh man?
It's horrible.
It's a horrible feeling, right? You're like, oh, because it's like a thing that you have to do now. You had the click. Once the click happens, you have to do it.
Yes, it's like Tennessee Williams's click.
Yeah.
Well, that was a different story, but he had a click too. But and you don't really know what path it's going to take you down. I mean, I know that it's going to be a long road. I know that because I've been down this road so many times now. And when people come to me with a documentary idea or say, "Oh, I'm thinking about making a doc," I say, "Well, first of all, it's going to take you, let's say 5 to 10 years of your life, and it's going to drive you insane." And you're going to want to, it's like crawling through broken glass year after year. But at the end of it, you're going to be so happy that you did it. And, you're going to get to share this dream that you had with the world. So that's pretty much what happened with this movie.
Yeah, with this movie, Mineshaft, The Cruising Murders, it looks at the movie Cruising from 1980, which was also featured in my book, Screening Party. We did a big chapter on it, and I too found it fascinating for some of the reasons you talk about in the movie. But also you find out other things related to the movie. How far in were you in poking around until you realized the scope of what it could be? Because this is not the surface documentary of cruising that one might imagine, like a behind the scenes of the movie. It's that plus a whole lot of other stuff.
Well, I don't think anybody listening to your podcast would not know what cruising is, but just in case, it was a movie. It was a movie starring Al Pacino, and it came out in 1980, and it was directed by William Friedkin, who had done The Exorcist and The French Connection and Sorcerer, and incredible filmmaker. And he decided he wanted to make a movie that was going to be set in the underworld, the gay underworld of leather and S&M, and the real scene that was going on in New York in the so-called meatpacking district, where all these sort of bars that were hidden away, and you had to know where you were going, and there was no sign on the door, and you had to be a member of a place like the Mineshaft, which is one of the more notorious gay S&M bars. So Friedkin decided he wanted to make this film. He was going to cast Al Pacino as a cop going undercover to solve murders in the leather world. And when the movie was being filmed in New York City in the summer of 1979, the script leaked, and it was perceived to be an attack on the gay community, not just a murder mystery set in that world. And we can talk about what happened there, but it resulted in thousands of people in the streets protesting the movie and trying to get this movie shut down. And so I thought that's first of all, Cruising is sort of a notorious. It's a gay classic now, but for many, many years, it was sort of this bad object that you weren't supposed to admit that you liked, or even that you saw.
Or that you even thought it was interesting. And that's part of what I was writing about in my book about it. Because it is kind of compelling to watch. And it is at times kind of sexy and dark and gritty. And he's a really good filmmaker, and Pacino's compelling. And then it's also weird. And there's weird lines that are like, no gay person has ever been within 400 feet of this script. It's just all of it. All of it's fascinating. Did you remember the first time you saw it? Did you see it on cable? Did you see it at a revival house? What was your first exposure to it?
So my Cruising origin story is when the movie came out. And I was in 1980 when it came out. I guess I would have been like 10 or 11.
Right.
But I remember it was reviewed on the Siskel and Ebert show, sneak previews, where they used to review movies and they would show clips. And that was like the only place you could see movie clips. And they showed some scenes from Cruising, and I don't remember exactly what scenes they were, but I know that they made an impression on me. It was probably some of the bar scenes, but nothing too crazy, but just like enough that it was this tantalizing glimpse at this like crazy forbidden world.
A certain kind of masculinity, a certain kind of sexiness, and all you have to do is see the mustache, and you're like, I'm in. Like it's visceral and it's instantaneous. It's an aesthetic, right, and a feeling.
Yes, well, at the time I wasn't thinking about that too much because I was 11. But all I knew that this is scary, this is forbidden. And, I lived in Queens, so it was not, it was far enough away from Manhattan that was another world. It was this forbidden world. So I knew about cruising. I heard the radio ads that were really creepy and spooky. And I remember the protest because I used to watch Live at 5 with Jack Cafferty and Sue Simmons in New York, and they would cover the protest. It was big news. It was a big local news story, but it became a national news story too, the protests. And then over the years, it just was there. I didn't see the movie until I was coming out in the early 90s, and my coming out was all tied together with movies and Vito Russo's book, The Celluloid Closet. And Vito's book, I'm sure a lot of people already know, but it's a book that he wrote in the late 70s, early 80s about how queer people were represented in film. And cruising loomed large in that book, because it was probably one of the biggest mainstream depictions of gay life up until that time. And it was a depiction that a lot of people in the community didn't want to be shown. I think a lot of the protests were the idea that, well, yes, this is part of the community, but we don't really want to talk about that part. We want everyone to think that we're like, your mailman and your grocery clerk and, your kid's teacher at school, and we're nice, normal people like everybody else, right? That was a lot of what the movement was trying to do at that time. And that was necessary at that time. But at the same time, there's many, many facets to who we are. And part of it is gay S&M leather. That is part of who we are as well. So I had to see this movie, even though I knew it was sort of this notorious movie that you weren't supposed to like or admit that you like, because it's so protested. But I found it extremely upsetting because it is very violent and dark, but also very compelling because, the camera takes you into these forbidden spaces, and it was filmed in the late 70s in the real bars with real guys, real leather guys who just literally walked in off the street to be extras and wearing their gear and everything. But the movie has these crazy mixed messages because at the same time as it's celebrating the exuberance of gay life at the time and the guys being super masculine and comfortable with their sexuality and having lots of sex of all kinds, and the camera's there just like letting you be a voyeur to all of this, that's great. But at the same time, once in a while in the movie, guys are getting murdered while having sex. So, they're seeking out this sex, but they're getting punished for it at the same time. So that's a crazy mixed message. And I could see looking at it why people thought that this is a movie that needed to be protested, because kind of a message is that sending, right? So, of course, I watched every movie in Vito's book. I went through literally the list and got to cruise and watched it. I think I saw it on VHS when I was in college still. Yeah. And, it really packed a wallop for me, and I found it just fascinating. And also, like, plot-wise, it's very complex and a little confusing, and
it's not a great thriller. Like, it's not in terms of a satisfying, like, who done it and why and what. Like, I felt like they changed it after they shot it, according to your movie.
There is a killer in the movie, and they catch the killer, but weirdly, it's not the killer that you see in other scenes. There's several killers, and they're all wearing, black leather cap and black jacket, and it's sort of. It feels like it's inspired by the Italian horror movies that were being made at the time. They're called giallos that Dario Argento was making. And they always have like a killer with a leather glove, and it's very violent. But it also feels like it's really heavily inspired by the porn of the time, and I know that William Friedkin was heavily researching this aesthetic. So he had stacks of, magazines like Drummer Magazine, which was like a leather magazine. I know he was watching all the porn of the time because he was populating the background scenes in cruising with actual porn stars, so you could spot them. There's at least 3 or 4 or 5 of them that I can spot and see, and you can see them. Yeah. So it's pulling from a lot of influences. There's Tom of Finland in there too. I mean, it's really for a straight guy, and William Friedkin, as far as we know, he was a straight guy, but he has these voyeuristic tendencies, and he's also a showman, and he wants to show audiences things they've never seen before, and he likes to shock. I mean, look at The Exorcist, which he had made just a few years before this one. All his movies have these shocking moments in it that really get your attention, and Cruising is no exception.
Was this his first movie after The Exorcist? Was this his follow-up to The Exorcist?
He did a movie called Sorcerer after The Exorcist. Right. There were others too, but Sorcerer was a big, major bomb actually. And then he did this, and this was also a bomb. And it was sort of the end of the 70s auteur director filmmaking. And his filmmaking never really recovered. He made some great movies after, Cruising, but no, Cruising was something that he got under his skin. And he wasn't the first director to try to make this movie. There was a book called Cruising, and Friedkin just took the title.
Yeah.
He threw out everything else except the title. So it's not really based on the book, although there is a book. And other people had tried to make that book, including Steven Spielberg, which is insane.
Wow.
Spielberg wanted to make this movie, and also Brian De Palma wanted to make this movie. And I think and he didn't, but he did write a script, which I have never read. I would love to find it. But I think a lot of what he was writing for his version of Cruising ended up in Dress to Kill, which is another questionable queer depiction. In this case, trans person. So, it's fascinating to me. Richard Gere was originally going to be in this movie and not Pacino. So it's really interesting to think about all the different versions that could have been.
Isn't it interesting that movies that are problematic and not good for gays also have a nostalgia value? Oh, Dress to Kill. I remember when that, you know what I mean? Oh, that horrible thing. But we have a soft spot for it because it's nostalgia now too, you know?
I think we can know that these are, let's say, problematic, as they say.
Yeah.
Now, but we can still kind of love them. I mean, in terms of Cruising, there are things about it that are really indefensible. But that's okay, you know. I talked to people who were coming of age at the time when Cruising was being made, and they had this feeling about it that they will never, ever see this movie. But then they have seen the movie now because of the documentary. They're like, okay, it's been 40, 50 years. I think I'll finally watch it. And they still didn't like it very much. But I think that a lot of it was the programming that you're not supposed to like this movie.
Yeah.
But I think the younger people who've really embraced this film as a cult classic, I mean, if you go to see a revival screenings of it now, a lot of the audience is like 20-somethings, 30-somethings, people who were not even alive when this movie was made. And they don't have all the baggage of the protests, and they love it. There's a camp aspect to it, too, because like you said, some of the dialogue is, clearly ridiculous.
Hips or lips.
Hips or lips. There's some lines that are just, and a lot of things just don't make sense. But however, it gets a lot right.
Yeah.
The hankies and all this, the look of all the guys. And one thing that it doesn't get right, it has a great score. It's all these punk rock songs.
Yeah.
Friedkin fell in love with punk. So there's all these punk rock songs and it's on the soundtrack, but they never would have played any of those songs at the Mineshaft. It would have been all Donna Summer, it wouldn't have been punk, but it gives it a really interesting sound as well. And the sound design is really cool too. There's all this crunching leather and chains and things, and it's very spooky.
Yeah, it's a vibe for sure. Friedkin also made The Boys in the Band, and then he made this, and he really went he got very immersed in the world. They talk about going to these clubs and researching, and they danced him, and was it Randy Jurgensen that went with him, and they would go in to research and have these nights out, these boys' nights out. And they had to dance, apparently not that well. But Friedkin was into this stuff. Nobody forced him to make this movie, right? He was into it. No,
and it's wild that this guy has made, two gay classics. He's Boys in the Band, which was also picketed at the time. The Boys in the Band was based on a play, and the play is sort of a pre-Stonewall play. So by the time the movie came out, a lot of the gay activism was around, shedding the stereotypes of the past and sort of the sissy stereotypes and all this stuff. And we're not going to take it anymore. And so by the time the movie came out, it was almost like a time capsule of a different way of thinking, like the Sweater Queens and Judy Garland and all that stuff, which a lot of guys were trying to get away from.
Right.
So that was picketed at the time by the same guy who picketed a few years later Cruising, Arthur Bell, who was a gay reporter for the Village Voice who was not a fan of William Friedkin.
He's quite a character in your story. He's very outspoken, but he's hardworking, and he really stirs up the stuff, and he's kind of ends up in the middle of the story because one of the murders that happen, the killer basically confessed to Arthur, right? In a phone call?
He did. So Arthur Bell, and one of the things I love about talking about this movie is I get to say these names, and we get to talk about these people who are pretty much forgotten. I don't want to say Arthur Bell has been forgotten, but most people don't know who he is. And he was one of the, if not the first openly gay reporter on the Gay Beat in New York City. And he wrote about nightlife and parties and fun stuff, but he also wrote about gay bashings and crime and murder. And there were all these murders happening around New York City, and the mainstream press couldn't didn't really care to report on these murders. So he was, one of the only people who was trying to get to the bottom of what was happening. There were a series of mysterious murders where they called them the bag murders, and they were body parts that were wrapped in garbage bags that were floating, that were found floating in the Hudson River. And, those bodies were never identified. And the main reason, you asked me before, what my expectations were of trying to make this film. When I first started it, I thought it was really going to be more about the making of Cruising, and that would be the emphasis. And I knew that there were real murders that inspired the film, but I had no idea how much the film would be about the main murder that William Friedkin was inspired by, and that was the murder of Addison Verrill. And Addison Verrill was a reporter for Variety, an entertainment reporter. And he specialized in the porn business, which was like being reported as any other business in Variety. And he was this very gregarious, talented, 36-year-old gay guy living his best life in New York City in the late 70s and taking part in everything the city had to offer, including this sort of sexual wonderland that was available to gay men at that time. If you wanted to participate in that, you could have sex all over the place. You could go to the bars, you could go to the baths, you could go to the trucks.
You could climb in the back of a semi-truck.
Climb into the back of a dark truck.
Yeah.
Have sex with guys in the back of the truck. The piers, there were these sort of half demolished piers that were just sitting there, and gay men sort of would invade these spaces, and we would claim them for ourselves and be free, And so Addison, he participated in all of that. But one night he went to the Mineshaft, which we talked about before, which is this notorious leather bar down on, what was the name of the street? Anyway, in the meatpacking district. He met a guy there. They went home together, and in the middle of the night, Addison was murdered by this guy. Yeah. And that was the first time they'd ever met. And it was a shocking crime that was reported by Arthur Bell in the Village Voice. And there were several articles that Arthur wrote about the murders when they were trying to find who the killer was. And he wrote these articles and then got a phone call from the killer. And that's all in the film, so I don't want to give too much away. But,
he basically says it. But one of the things your film does, I think a lot of people, that they just have sort of a passing awareness of this, even gay people, assume that it's all one murderer, but that was never proven. Like, the bag people were never really confirmed to be connected to this other guy. This other guy, the way it is depicted, it feels like he had this one moment of murderous instinct, and that happened. But it's not the serial thing that I think a lot of people have in their imagination because of the movie and because of the reporting and just sort of the urban legend of it all, right?
Yeah, it's become an urban legend. When I started working on the film, all I really knew was that I knew Addison's name and I knew the identity of the killer. And that man's name is Paul Bateson.
Yeah.
And so I knew about them, but there's not a lot of information out there. And there are all these claims that Paul Bateson is a serial killer. And because no one had really dug deep into this story and talked to the people who were there. And so part of the mission of this film is to really, first of all, to give Addison his identity back, because if you know about him at all, he doesn't even have a Wikipedia page or anything. I mean, everything that's there about him and his writing isn't really easily accessible because he's lived in a pre-internet age, right? So all we know about Addison is he wrote for Variety. He was killed by this crazy guy. That's it.
Yeah.
All we know about Paul Bateson are a few details that are incredible and shocking that I don't really want to give away right here, but you have to see the movie. But a lot of that information is not quite accurate. So part of the mission of the movie is to sort of set the record straight on all these people.
You were able to get Addison's ex-lover, Bob Geary, and his sister, Pamela Walker Verrill, to be interviewed. What do those emails look like when you're writing to somebody to say, I know this is a really painful thing in your life. I want to try to set the record straight. Will you talk to me? I mean, I could see being in your position and being like, I'll write that email tomorrow. You know what I mean? The face that you make when I even bring it up, but that's the job, right? And that's what's going to get you the gold, but you have to steel yourself up for that moment. Is it an email? Is it a phone call? How do you get people like that to even listen to you, let alone sit for an interview?
Well, in making these films, I've been in the position a lot where you're reaching out to somebody and you're not quite sure what their attitude is about the subject. But this is my first film that deals with a crime, with a murder. It's the darkest thing I've ever done, that's for sure. And so, reaching out to Addison Verrill's sister, first it was trying to find her and find anybody in Addison's life. We got all the papers from the district attorney's office, all the police reports and everything. We have stacks and stacks and stacks of material, which just, I couldn't believe it. So we found letters back and forth from Addison's sister to the assistant DA who was trying the case. And it had her name on it and her address. So we did some detective work. We eventually found her. And yes, I wrote her an email. And it might have been a letter. I don't remember if it was an email or a letter. But it was, you have to be as sensitive as you possibly can, because I would imagine that it would be a shock to hear from somebody after so many years. And she did write me back. She was very cautious because she didn't know me. We started having conversations. I sent her some of my previous work. Just to sort of show her where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to exploit her brother's death or anything like that. I really just wanted to rehumanize him and tell this story. And then she eventually started talking to me, and she said, when I got your letter, something is in the air, because I had not thought about this really and sat down and thought about Addison in a long, long, long time, years and years and years, because it was so traumatic. In order to just move on with my life, I had to steel myself and just move forward and leave this in the past. But she had Addison's boxes up in the attic, and she brought them down within a week or two of my writing to her for the first time. So she started going through his materials and pulling all his letters and photographs and things. And then she heard from me. So she thought maybe that there was a reason for that.
Yeah.
And maybe the timing was right. And so she did decide to participate. That was quite a few years ago at this point. And she sat down, I think it was a 3 or 4 hour interview. And, it was very emotional. It was still like, I'm not quite sure if I'm doing the right thing, but she took a leap of faith and just decided to trust me. And we established a trust. And, then she provided all of Addison's, very, very personal letters and photographs and home movies and all that stuff that as a documentarian, that's gold. I mean, that you need all that stuff to tell the story and to sort of drag people from their graves, which is what I do. Yeah. And, she didn't sign a release for a year, which was a little nerve wracking. Yeah. I don't know if I should even talk about that. It's very, inside baseball, but that's part of it. That's part of the trust. Eventually she decided, okay, I'm all in. And she signed her release form. Usually you get these things signed the day of. Yeah. Because if you don't have a signed release form, you can't use the interview. Right? Yeah. So there have been cases where people have done interviews and didn't want to sign, and I couldn't use it. So
heartbreaking.
It's happened.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But she was incredible. She's just such a warm, loving, compassionate person. And, every year would go by. I mean, it just took 10 years to make. So every year would go by and she says, how's the film going? How's the film going? And I want to be alive to see it, cause she's getting up there and she just really wanted, and I felt that pressure too. I wanted to make sure she got to see it, and she did. And then she was able to come to our premiere in New York at Tribeca, and she did her Q&A with us, and she had the entire audience in tears. It was incredible.
That's
she held
amazing.
The palm of her hand telling the story. So she's incredible person. I'm so grateful that she, decided to trust me.
What was so moving about how she was in New York afterwards?
Well, I think after people saw the film and they got to know her and love her, and then they didn't expect her to be there. And then suddenly we announced her, and then she came up and people were just so happy to see her because they just fell in love with her in the film. Because, you're with her on the journey, and she held that pain, her parents,
she stood up for her gay brother.
She stood up for her brother. And, and part of the film is about how, at that time, a lot of gay men, I'm talking about gay men because that's what the film's about primarily, they did not share their lives with their families. They were not necessarily out to their families.
It was very compartmentalized.
100%. And Addison was not out to the family and not out to Pam. And Pam told the story. This story is not in the film, but she says that the last time she saw him, she was in New York. They were visiting him, and she was walking a few feet behind him and talking to her brother, I think, her other brother, and saying, I think Addison's gay, and I'm gonna bring it up. I'm gonna talk to him about it because I think that it would be okay to bring this up, and maybe we could become closer. And she never got the chance to do that. So when he died, she came to New York to wrap up his affairs, and she got to meet his circle of friends. And they just, part of what, our audience in New York fell in love with her, because she was talking about how Addison's friends just took her in and loved on her and told her about the brother that she didn't know,
Right.
And she got to know about gay people. She didn't know anything about gay people at that time. And she sure does now.
Right. And stepped up in a way, like really advocated for him. It sounds like in the case and the legal parts of it and all of it. You also talked to his ex-lover, Bob Geary, who must have been another one of those hard emails to write. How'd that go? That
was incredible. And that's what I'm saying, how this movie just became something completely different, because I didn't know about Pam going into this. I definitely did not know about Bob Geary. And so when I interviewed Pam, I said, well, who are these gay guys that I should talk to? And she said, oh, there's a guy, I think his name is Bob. And I think they were roommates at one point. And so, of course, that's what gay guys used to call their lovers.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I found a scrap of paper in the DA's, material that we got from the DA's office, and it was just Bob, and it's Bob Geary. So we tracked him down. I have this wonderful producer friend of mine, Tennille Oldham, who helps find people who don't necessarily want to be found. And we found Bob, and I wrote him a letter, and the first letter I think came from her, because we just wanted to make sure we had the right guy.
Yeah.
And he was not happy. He was angry and defensive and shocked.
Yeah, it was like this thing after all these years, this nightmare emerges again.
And then so she passed him along to me. So I got
So now it's time for you to turn on the charm.
No, and I don't know if it was charm, but we had a very just frank conversation. We had many conversations where he started to open up. And this is so long ago. He's been with the same guy now almost since this happened,
Right.
So, and this is not part of his life anymore. But it gave him an opportunity to deal with this trauma that he'd sort of buried.
Yeah.
And the anger that he has toward what happened, and the anger he has toward the killer. But he also, we established a trust, and then he opened up the floodgates, sat down for this incredible interview that we did the day before lockdown.
Wow.
So thank God that happened, because literally the next day there were no more interviews for a while. And he had all these incredible photos of Addison that really humanized him, and were sort of the gay side of Addison.
Yeah.
The family photos of the Addison with, his parents and everybody. Pictures of Addison, jokingly like posing outside the trucks and on the piers and things like that. So, and Bob and I have become really, really good friends. And I think he's a wonderful, wonderful guy. And he's still a little bit apprehensive about this finally coming out in the world, where he realizes, this is really going to be in the world. People are going to get to know me and my story. But I think he's very glad that he did the film, and it was very, healing, I hope, for him to tell the story.
Has he seen it finished?
Yeah, he's seen it. He hasn't seen it with an audience.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he'll be at Outfest. I'm hoping that he will be at Outfest. So we'll see what happens.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things they fought about as a couple, it seemed, would be Addison's sexual freedom, and like they were on different pages in that way. And then that's, he ends up getting killed, and there's a lot to unpack there and to talk about, but he does, and it's interesting.
The dynamic that they had was really interesting too. Addison he was only 36, but he was older at that time than Bob was. And there was a little bit of a more like, okay, kid, I'll tell you how the world really works, and there was a little bit of that. And they fought all the time, and they had a great sex life, and they loved each other, and they were just living the life. But it still happens today. Gay couples we're different than we're just different.
Yeah.
And there are couples that one goes out to play, they play together, they play separately, anything goes. And Addison and Bob were very upfront with each other about what they wanted. And it's not like Bob didn't play with Addison sometimes. There's a story that I wish I could have kept in the film about they took home a gay porn star named Big Bill.
Right.
Who is Big Bill, if you've seen his movies. And, it's not like Bob was a nun through this whole period, But they definitely did have different attitudes about it. And Addison would go out every night.
And Addison was into it. The trucks, like, it was like his nightly thing. He talked about we'd watch the news and then off he'd go, climbing in a truck. Really interesting. The protests that happened in New York, they were a scene. Like, they were a party. They were like big and ongoing and kind of like the place to be, right? Like it felt like it was almost like if you weren't at the cruising protest, then what are you even doing? Like, that's the place to see and be seen, right?
One of the interviewees says it was the hottest thing that was happening in the summer.
Right, it was like almost fun. Yeah, like it was the thing to do. Fun.
Yes, and the movie hadn't even been out yet. They had just started filming. So all they were going on was Arthur Bell, who hated the script. And this was an early version of the script. I've seen this version. It's not even remotely like what ended up being filmed. Although what ended up being filmed, Arthur Bell didn't like either, which we could talk about later.
Yeah, but, he goes off. It's awesome.
There was a mole in the production, a gay mole. I'm assuming it was a gay mole.
I love a gay mole.
A gay mole. Got the script to Arthur Bell. He read it. It made him furious because he was a gay activist. He was in the original Gay Activist Alliance along with Vito Russo. And part of his mission in the GAA was to talk about not just the laws, but the culture.
Yes.
So yes, we need to change the laws, but we need to change the culture and how we're depicted. So he was very sensitive to that. And so when Cruising came along, he'd already hated Boys in the Band for its depiction of us as sort of self-loathing, queens, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And then Cruising comes and it's depicting us as bloodthirsty murderers. And if you go out and have sex, you're going to be murdered. And he was not having it.
He was not having it.
He published articles in The Voice about this, and everyone read The Voice every week. And he had a following. People listened to what he said.
Yeah.
And he said, if you see them in your neighborhood, go out and make their lives a living hell, something like that.
And there were phone trees. People on phone trees?
They would the organizers would figure out where they were filming, and then people, I guess today you'd use Signal to organize your protest. But then you would just call, you call two friends, they call two friends, they call two friends, and suddenly you've got 1,000 people in the street blowing whistles, chanting. The movie Cruising's got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho, blowing the whistles. Pots and pans, whatever noise you could make. So if you watch the movie, a lot of the movie, the outdoor scenes are looped, meaning like the actors came back later to do the dialogue, right? And there were thousands of people on hot summer nights, people just having a great time. And I think I would have to say the majority of those people there didn't necessarily, maybe they knew what they were there to protest, but they were just also there to have a good time. And we found some incredible footage of the protest and audio of the protest. And you can look in the crowd and spot all sorts of like New York gay luminaries, like the guy who Dog Day Afternoon is based on. The real guy.
Right on. Interesting. Okay.
He shows up all over the footage. He's always where the camera is because clearly he wanted to be where the camera was. You see Marsha P. Johnson, the legendary Marsha P. Johnson in the footage there too. And we got to interview some of the protesters now, about what that experience was like. And we also got to interview some of the extras who in essentially were crossing a picket line to be in the movie.
Yeah. I remember there was a story about it in Mandate or something that I came across when I was researching for Screening Party. It was a long story about what it was like to be in there. And you talk about this in your movie, that some people were like, some representation is better than nothing, and let's show them what it's really like. And I think one of the most poignant parts of the movie and the whole idea of it is that you get to see kind of what it was like before AIDS, right before AIDS, how this group of people were being with each other. And I think in a very unvarnished, beautifully shot, 70s gritty, cool, you know what I mean? Like, it's cool to look at this movie. And you got to see them being free before the real monster that wasn't one of the killers in the movie emerged, like a year or two later. And that was sort of like, oh, this is what it was like then. That really moved me, just that idea.
Yeah, when you watch the movie now, of course, you're watching it in hindsight, knowing what we know now. And, New York City was at the epicenter of the virus, along with San Francisco and LA. And, it was New York. And now we know the virus was circulating in the community for years before people started showing symptoms. And the first people to get sick were, 1980, 1981, 1982. People were dying. People knew what was going on by then. We didn't know it was a virus until later, but we knew something was going on. And the people in the film who were shooting those scenes in the summer of 79, you look at that. Well, I know for a fact a lot of the porn stars that are in the film, they're gone. Eric Ryan is one of the porn stars. He died of AIDS in the early 80s. Many of the others did as well. And I have to assume a lot of the guys that we'll never know their names also. We probably lost, a year or 2 years, 3 years after the film. So it is one of our interview subjects. I didn't use this in the film, but he said it was like watching footage of the Warsaw Ghetto. And knowing what was in store for those people just a few years later. So, the film Mineshaft does take a turn at a certain point where we do talk about that scene and what happened to that scene because of AIDS and what happened to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And what happened to the culture. It's very, for me, it's the melancholy that hangs over all of cruising, when you get to see all of that exuberance and animal lust.
Yeah, just like wild, balls to the wall. Maybe the worst thing that could happen is you got syphilis or something. Like, like that. And they were in it, and like to have that captured on film is I think a good thing. And even today, like there's, with prep and everything, there is a resurgence, I feel like, of that spirit in a way, but it's a different, I imagine it's not that. It's different. Like it's echoes, but not, because of everything that's unfolded and everything that we've all been through. It's just interesting. You know what? One of the saddest parts of the thing to me is the Pacino of it all. Like I think he felt burned by it because they changed the ending after he had created a character, right? And he's never spoken about it.
Al Pacino is the star of this movie, and he did not sign up for being protested. I think he had no idea that he just signed up because it was an interesting part.
Yeah.
In an interesting movie with a great director. And the two of them teaming up is what an incredible duo, Friedkin and Pacino, right? But then suddenly he's making this film and people are screaming at him and calling him the F word, the F slur, on the streets, throwing bottles at him. And suddenly he's the enemy, and he is not homophobic at all. I mean, he's a very sensitive guy.
Yeah.
Not homophobic. And was made to feel like he was doing something wrong by being in this movie. And then, it's in the film, I don't want to give too much away, but during the course of the editing, things were changed around his character, and he was not happy with it. And he got into a big fight with Friedkin and all the producers, and he didn't do any publicity for the film when it came out. And in fact, he's never talked about it.
He's never talked about it.
No. I mean, I was excited when his book came out because I thought, well, maybe he'll talk about it in his book, Sonny Boy. And I read the book, which is a great book. I love that man so much. And it's a great book. And there is a paragraph about cruising, but it's pretty much dismissed. And it says, what a bad time he had making the film. And he claims that he gave away his salary for that film to a gay organization. I don't know which one that is or if that's even true, but it's at least he acknowledges it. And when we were at Tribeca, he had a film also at Tribeca. So I was hoping to run into him, but we've never met.
Yeah, I would love to get him to talk about that. But I sense that the pain around it is real because first of all, as an actor, you go so deep and you're creating a character and it's very personal. It's all this stuff. And then he's getting yelled at, and then it felt like a kind of scab that he did not want to go near. And that's heartbreaking. If you watch the film, it's implied at the end of the movie that he could be the killer, or one of the killers, and that's not what he signed up for. And that's also why I think people still look at that movie askance. That it's implied that gayness is contagious, right? That he got seduced into this life, and now he's going to be seduced into murder. It's the next step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, one of my favorite people in the movie is Ken Oliver. Talk to me about Ken Oliver.
So we wanted to talk about the killer, Paul Bateson, and who this guy was, because he is sort of a boogeyman and an urban legend, an urban myth. If you look him up. He was even depicted in Mindhunter, the David Fincher
interesting
show a few years ago, which was really interesting. And so I was curious to know more about him. And he, I don't want to give too much away, but he has a really interesting background, let's just say, and some very interesting connections to Cruising, the movie itself, and to William Friedkin himself.
Yeah.
So he was the man who was arrested for this murder. And, I didn't even know if he was alive or dead when I started the film. And we, through these papers that we found in the DA's office, there was some reference to this guy, Ken Oliver, who worked with him in the 70s at an office job. And we got in touch with him. And he was also very wary and hesitant because he's very protective of Paul, who was his friend. And when Paul was arrested for murder, he saw Paul's picture in the Village Voice and was horrified because that was not the man that he knew.
Right.
I mean, he knew Paul as, Paul was like openly gay in the office and singing, Diana Ross songs on the PA system and openly gay at work in the early 70s, which is really unusual at the time. And but then he was reading about his friend, who committed this awful, horrible murder, and was sitting in Rikers Island, and started to go visit him because everyone had abandoned him.
Yeah,
and it just gets you to thinking, what if your best friend was arrested for murder? What would you do? Would you abandon him or her or them, or would you go and be their friend regardless? And so Ken decided, I think because of his background in recovery. And, Paul was a very heavy alcoholic and drug abuser. And so he thought, maybe he could use just a friend. And so he became that friend, and he maintained that friendship for years and years and years. And they were not lovers. They were just, he just has this in him, this kindness in him that he wanted to be Paul's friend. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. But also was very hesitant to be in this film because he didn't want to do anything that would exploit Paul, or he wanted Paul just to rest. So it did take some convincing. Yeah. This one's probably the trickiest one, but I think he's also glad that he did it. And he also shared all these incredible photos of Paul over the years, and Paul in prison year after year after year. He was in prison for years. Yeah.
I noticed that all of the interviews, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were set against black. They were a black. So you make that aesthetic choice up front. Right?
Yeah.
Had you done that before? Or a lot of times in documentaries, it's just they're sitting in their house and it's their house. But you made a choice.
Well, I wanted to do something that was just very simple and timeless. And also because when I started this, I had no funding, and I just I don't know how long this is going to take. I just need to come up with something. Yeah. I think the first interview we did was maybe Jim Fall and Alonzo Duralde years ago.
Our friends who were like, okay.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, just sit in front of this black background and talk about cruising. Because I didn't even know where this was going. So I'm glad I made that choice. Because when you're doing a doc, it's just the design of the interviews is really, really important. Yeah. And I wanted something that would be consistent and easy to replicate. Because we shot in New York and San Francisco and Los Angeles. So we needed something that was replicable. Oh, and Seattle, too, for Dan Savage.
Yeah. Dan Savage, a good voice of everything. Did you literally have a black, background that you were toting around in your carry-on?
It's just a black, it's like a rolled up piece of paper.
Interesting.
And you just hang it. And so the Bob Geary, the last interview we did before lockdown, it's in my living room.
Yeah.
Right here, 6 feet from here. And our great DP, Jesse Dana, he just rolled that thing, and you could be anywhere. So it's just a liminal space. Like back rooms. You're in a liminal space.
Exactly. I think when people are telling stories, that the spirit of that story can set in on them over the time. This is a dark story. Did it have an effect on you as you were working on it?
I just got obsessed with it.
Yeah.
I got obsessed with it. When we found the DA's papers, I don't think we were supposed to get those. I don't know how this happened, but we ended up with a box from the DA's vault, and it had everything. It had the crime scene photos. It had notes from the cops when they were investigating the cops went to the Mineshaft to try to find out who the killer was. Mm-hmm. So I was just going down all these different rabbit holes and getting just completely obsessed with this story. And then I started to think what if Paul was responsible for other murders? Because it was suggested in his trial that he was responsible for those other bag murders that we talked about. And we did end up finding some evidence on that. Tennille, who I mentioned before, she is, her expertise is in forensics and trying to identify victims. She helped to produce a doc that was on Netflix called The Confession Killer, which was about Henry Lee Lucas, who confessed to hundreds of murders, which he did not commit. So the documentary was really about identifying who the victims really were and who the killer really was to give the family some peace.
Yeah.
So she ended up finding there's some pieces of evidence in the film of some of the evidence from the bag murders, these ripped up pieces of jeans with a belt, and some underwear. Yeah. That when we found those, like, I couldn't believe it. It was just, that just took my breath away to see that evidence, So, no, I mean, I think that I'm so driven. I just want to get this thing on the screen and tell the story and do it right.
Yeah.
So I also feel really protective of all the people who trusted me with the story. Those three that you mentioned.
Yeah. The Village voice writer, Bell, right?
Arthur Bell.
Arthur Bell. He has quite a scene with Friedkin at the screening, right? That's amazing. Like, I love these outspoken guys from that era that were not afraid to, like, ruffle feathers, that were, like, I don't have that gene. I'm too make nice. I don't know. I don't have the balls, I don't think, to stand up in a screening and go off on a director, right?
Arthur Bell comes from the Gay Activist Alliance, and they were famous for, they called them zaps, where they would go to, like, let's say Harper's Magazine publishes a negative story about homosexuality. A guy from the magazine wrote, "If I could have my way, I would make homosexuality vanish from the face of the earth." So what do the GAA people do? They show up at the Harper's office and scream and get in people's faces and scream and yell. Yes. So that cliche of the angry gay activist, that comes from Arthur Bell.
They were angry.
And all those guys, they were angry. They were angry because they've been lied to all these years and told they were sick and dirty and depraved and damaged. So, Arthur Bell wanted to correct that. And so with a movie like Cruising is a direct attack on our humanity, he felt.
Yeah.
And so he made it his mission to try to destroy this movie. And he hated William Friedkin, hated him with a passion. It was like a little irrational. And Arthur Bell was, someone in the film says he wasn't all peaches and cream.
Yeah. It could be in the next feud, the Ryan Murphy feud. It could be William Friedkin versus Arthur Bell.
Well, that's another story. Yes.
That's another. You've been making docs for a while. How has the landscape changed?
The landscape has changed pretty radically over the last few years. I don't think it's any surprise. I mean, our industry as a whole is going through some really major shifts and changes, and the economics of documentary is completely, it's fucked.
It's fun. It seems like there's all these places that people might watch them, the Netflix and all of it all, but it hasn't, that's not right. That's not how it works.
There were maybe 10 years ago, there was a time where the streamers were gobbling up all sorts of independent docs and spending lots of money for them. And that time's gone. And the idea that your films can play, I'm talking about documentaries, but that goes for lots of, scripted films too, that your film can play at a festival and then get snapped up at a festival. It does happen. I mean, Back Rooms is a good example that happened. And there are some docs, The Perfect Neighbor is a good example. That one was snapped up at a festival and by Netflix and did really well, but that's a rarity. And so it's hard to get your film. It's hard to find a distributor these days. So we're all trying to find other ways to do it, get your films out there. Film festivals are a really, really important way to get your film seen in front of an audience. That doesn't necessarily translate to getting distribution. So we're all trying to figure it out, but we're all insane, and we're not letting any of this stop us. We're still plowing forward and doing it. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do it. I have a few more in the queue that are waiting to be finished, and I'm just going to keep going and find a way. There's always a way, because you've got to. If you feel like you've got the story that you've got to tell, maybe it'll be a doc, maybe it'll take another form, maybe it'll be a podcast, maybe it'll be something else. I don't know. But, clock is ticking. I've got like 5 or 6 more movies in me, I think. Yeah,
you're doing that Tarantino thing where you're giving them numbers now.
Well, I'm up to 10 now. He said he was going to stop at 10. My next one's going to be 10. I think I'll go beyond.
I happen to know what one of them is. Do you want to talk about any of your future projects, in case there's somebody out there that's really passionate about that subject and they have a lot of money?
Oh, yeah. Send it to me.
Yeah.
The next one I am talking about now because I'm pretty confident it will be done by the end of the year, which is called Goddess, The Fall and Rise of Showgirls, which you are in.
I love it so much. It's so exciting.
And I don't think I need to say to your audience what Showgirls is, but the documentary is really a very thorough, deep dive into the making of the film, the career of its director, Paul Verhoeven, the star of the film, obviously, Elizabeth Berkley, and what happened when the film came out and how it sort of crashed against the rocks and was a complete and total bomb when it came out and has been rediscovered and celebrated and is a beloved classic because of the gays, pretty much. And so the doc covers all of that. And I've been working on that almost as long as, maybe a little even longer than Mineshaft. It's been about 10 years. And that's going to be done by the end of the year.
Yay,
so we'll have
fantastic.
It out hopefully next year.
All right.
Hopefully next year we'll get it out.
It's going to happen. I can't wait. I can't wait to go see it. Is there a Jeffrey Schwarz sensibility in terms of a documentary filmmaking? Is there a thing that is like your thing when it comes to this world, or something that you think of as like, I don't know, key to how you approach these things?
Entertainment. I want to entertain people. That is my primary motivation. I want to entertain, surprise, delight, shock, horrify, make people cry at the end of the movie. I want people to, and I also want people to identify and sympathize and relate to people that they never thought they would in a film. Yeah. I love making the Tab Hunter film because a lot of the audience for that film were like conservative Christians who got to see a story about a gay man in the closet and how painful that is. And was for Tab Hunter. And it reached an audience who were not expecting that, And in this film, you are sympathizing and trying to understand what could make a guy like Paul Bateson do what he did. And listen to the sister of the man he killed talk about him as a child of God. Yeah. Which took my breath away. Like, I don't know if I'd be able to.
Right. And then also it's sort of like, to me, like that moment was gay people have been condemned by religion for so long, but also it's probably that part of her that allows her to be the sister that she's being in this movie to him. You can't uncouple them. They kind of go together. She wouldn't be sitting there being so warm if it weren't for that part of her, probably.
It's not like she would never forgive Paul for what he did to her brother.
Right.
But she does look at him as a human being. And she says in the film, like, he's a human being. He's a child of God on a journey, like we all are.
Aren't we all a child of God on a journey?
That took my breath away to hear that. So I love your
deep in a way.
It's really deep, and so I didn't expect that. And so people just give you these gifts in documentaries. They just give you this. It's just gold, So I'm just trying to do the best I can not to fuck it up and to, tell the story in a way that's really compelling and entertaining. And that's really primarily what I want to do. Like I watch lots of, quote unquote issue docs and docs that are about, other things that, are not my forte, right? I probably won't make a movie about, global warming or genocide or things like that, and there are filmmakers who are risking their lives all around the world right now to make films about what's going on in Ukraine and all these things. That's not me. I'm here to entertain and to get people to watch documentaries that don't normally watch documentaries, because they're just attracted to the story and bigger than life characters.
Do you get a sense that younger queer people have found your work and have learned things about their own history that they wouldn't have known otherwise? Do you ever? I'm sure that the fact that they exist, that's likely and a big possibility. But do you ever feel that? Does anyone ever say anything? Do you ever get proof that you're doing what you're doing?
I have to say I do.
Good.
And it's the best feeling in the world.
Thank you.
I do read the comments and I do read the letterbox comments and I do encounter people in real life. I got a message from a woman who said, like, I saw I Am Divine when I was 7. I loved it. And it changed my life. And that movie, it's not that old, but it's came out in 2013 or something.
Yeah.
And so, like, I feel like I have introduced people to topics and people they might not have ever heard of. Like, a lot of people never heard of Vito Russo, and they saw the film and they fall in love with him. And now he's talked about as one of our founding fathers of the movement, Yeah. So I don't know if the film enabled that to happen, but I don't think it hurt.
No, it absolutely did. Because what else would people be? They would go to his book or whatever, but there's no story about him, right? Yours. That's you. Yeah, you did it. You saved it.
I feel very gratified and very, very happy that the films do find an audience. And, I love reading what people write about it. I think it's just interesting. Even if they don't like it, I get something.
I love the Letterboxd comments. That's intriguing because Letterboxd people are bright. They don't scream, "I'm a dick." They seem thoughtful, right? So it must be gratifying probably to poke in there a little bit.
I'm in there.
You're in there. Good. Like I'm not that interested in the comments about things of my stuff. I don't know. I'm not that, I don't know. Maybe I'm not that brave or curious or whatever. Not that there's that much to be commenting on, but
I'm sure there are comments.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I did this play at the Fringe and people can write reviews, about your play. And a lot of the other playwrights were like, make sure you review us and da 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 da. I did not open that. I did not click on that button. I did not, because also it was a stage reading. It wasn't a full on production thing or whatever, but it was kind of like, that's fine. I'm not going to click on that button right now, which is interesting. So there you go. Which of your movies was the most widely seen? You've done movies about Jack Wrangler, the porn star, and Divine, and Tab Hunter, and Vito Russo, and like which one was like the one that, like I could see the Tab Hunter having the old Hollywood TCM kind of appeal, and like Alan Carr, like which one probably got the most eyes on it?
Vito played on HBO, so
yes.
That summer that it played, I think that probably got a bunch of people to watch it then when it came out. And there was a big billboard in the middle of Times Square for Vito.
Damn.
With a big billboard of Vito Russo.
Did you take a picture in front of it?
Oh, I wasn't in New York at the time, but I sure do have pictures of it. His family went and they all took pictures in front of it.
Amazing.
So that got a lot of views. Probably I Am Divine got a lot of attention because it's Divine, of course. And we did a theatrical run on that. It's played all over the world. And Tab Hunter Confidential probably is the one that has been the widest seen.
Interesting.
It was on Netflix and it was on it's played several times on Turner Classic Movies. So and people love Tab Hunter and they fall in love with him. So and they knew him before the documentary. And so the people who knew him sought it out. The people who never heard of him, now they know him. And that's where I really enjoy reading the comments from younger people who are learning the Tab story for the first time and getting to see what it was like in the 50s.
Have you ever been obsessed with something and were like, I would love to make a documentary about this, but I'm literally the only market. I'm the target market for this film.
I think I've done that over and over.
That's been your career.
I mean, I got to say, like I said at the beginning, nobody's banging down my door asking for these movies, but I
would literally bang your door down to ask for Goddess. And then next after, maybe you do the documentary about Coyote Ugly. I think it's a story that needs to be told. They danced on the bar, Jeffrey. They were dancing and they were clogging.
But we're not talking about Coyote Ugly the way we're talking. We're not talking about striptease. We're talking about
Showgirls. I know. Showgirls. I can't wait. And I love how Elizabeth Berkley has embraced it. She was at the Academy giving a speech and just like, I love the Berkeley of it all. But the journey, the years in the wilderness for these folks, sometimes it's a lot. Tell people how they can learn more about your movie and how they can come and see it at Outfest.
They can go on to automatpictures.com, which is my website, and all the movies are there, and you can learn about all of them, and Mineshaft as well. And we will be we're screening all over the country, all over the world. So the next one is Outfest next, and that will be on July 25th at 6:15. There's lots of great movies playing at Outfest over 4 days, 23rd to the 26th. And then after that, we're on to city after city after city in all over the world, which is really, really cool and exciting. And we got to support our film festivals there. It's a rough time for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And, we're living through a tumultuous period where the friends that were never really our friends in the corporate spaces, are pulling back on sponsorships, and a lot of, prides are having trouble, festivals are having trouble. So if you can support festivals like Outfest in LA and many, many others, your town probably has one. Go support these movies, go buy a ticket and be part of the community.
I love a festival. I love being part of a festival. I love a lanyard. I love a thing around my neck.
I love a lanyard.
Don't you love a lanyard? Do you keep them after the festivals, or do you throw them away?
I keep the card part,
yes,
but the actual lanyard, I always give them back, thinking that they'll recycle them, which I'm sure they will not.
No, they just end up in someone's glove compartment.
They end up in the trash.
Yeah.
But yes. I was just at Frameline in San Francisco, and that was just.
Did you screen in the Castro, the historic Castro?
We screened at the Roxy, which was appropriate because that was it's a little
seedier.
It's historic. I don't want to call it seedy, but it's a little seedier than
it's a vibe.
Definitely the Castro, and it's a vibe. And they screened Cruising as well after Mineshaft. So that was really, really cool.
What's your favorite moment in Cruising? I like when the big black guy in the jockstrap comes in and just slaps people. It's so random and weird. Like that feels like it's not part of the police handbook. That might be my favorite.
I don't want to call it my favorite scene because it's so disturbing. With that first scene, if you can get through that first scene, it's a murder scene, but it starts off like it's a pickup in a bar and the guys are flirting and they're very macho. And then they go home to one guy's apartment and there's like muscle magazines on the floor. And the guy you see there's nudity. It's very sexy. It's very erotic. And then it just turns and it's so scary because the one guy ties the other guy up and then the guy realizes what's about to happen to him. And it's really violent and really horrifying.
And I still remember that actor's face. Yeah. Like that actor face.
Yes, that was also a porn actor.
Yeah,
named Malo, and that was his stage name. And William Friedkin put him in the first scene of the movie, and has a very memorable scene. So, I don't want to say it's my favorite scene, but that's one of the scenes that's just burned into my memory because of how erotic it is, and then how violent and scary it is.
Yeah, it switches. Oh man. Here's my final thought. Say it's 30 years from now. What's a moment from this journey with this film that you'll always remember, either before or after or during?
Being at Tribeca and having all these leather guys show up.
Oh, that's amazing. They were in full-on leather. Did they wear leather to the thing?
Yes.
So they're literally like squeaking as they're sitting down and like, I'm so into it.
Dozens and dozens of them. Half the audience was in leather. And some of them were in the film, and a lot of the contingent of like friends of some of the leather guys that we talked to.
Yeah.
They all came, and a lot of the guys from the Eagle New York came. And, my parents were there. My dad made a comment.
I love your parents, by the way.
He said, these guys look so mean and rough and tough, but they're just pussycats. And they are.
That's right. That quote should have been in your movie, actually. Now, that's amazing. I love that the whole leather contingent showed up at Tribeca. Maybe we'll get that at Outfest. Can LA deliver it? Can they deliver it?
There's a leather scene here.
Okay.
There was a pretty vibrant leather scene. I haven't been to the Eagle in a while, but they're still there.
All right. I'm rooting for them. If you're listening to this, if you're in LA, put it on and show up and squeak your way into the theater and, rattle some chains, man. Jeffrey, congratulations. I'm proud of you, and I hope everyone gets to see this movie, and I hope you keep making all the movies that you want to make.
Thank you, and I want to thank you, Dennis, for doing this week after week after week, year after year after year, without fail.
I just keep doing it. Like
I love talking to you. We're friends off the mic, and I love talking to you, but I also love listening to your podcast and getting to hear about all these creative people. And we all have this thing in common, that we just have this story that we have to tell. Yeah. And it takes different forms. And, you are doing wonderful work, and I really appreciate it. And a lot of people appreciate what you do.
Well, it's similar what we're doing. We're trying to get these stories down. And we know there's not a big profit motive, but we feel like it's important. Like, I think we're similarly motivated in that way, right? And we just keep going. Just keep going. Yeah.
Keep going.
All right. That's the jam. Thank you, Jeffrey. Everybody go see Mineshaft. I also love the names of all those bars, like Anvil, Ramrod. Like, just they're hard, they're metallic, which is different than the shamey names like Alibis. And, there's the shamey gay bar names, but the leather bars were more like hard penis names.
One of them, the Rawhide, just reopened.
Oh, that's cool. I remember the Rawhide. Yeah.
And it's using all of the iconography, the 70s rough and tough
the fonts.
Iconography. All of it. And it's back. I haven't been yet, but next time I go to New York, I'm going to check out the Rawhide.
The Rawhide is back, everybody. All right. Thanks, Jeffrey. This was a blast. Bye. Thanks again to Jeffrey Schwarz. Go see Mineshaft, The Cruising Murders at Outfest on July 25th at 6:15, and watch for it when it comes your way if you're not in LA. All right, so this happened. For the 4th of July, the last few years, I've decided to just get out of town with my dog Enzo because he hates the fireworks. He hates them more every passing year, and there seems to be more of them every year. So my roommate and I, we went to Crestline, which is about, I don't know, an hour and a half maybe out of LA in the mountains on the way to Lake Arrowhead. My friend Mark Samuel lives there, and it's just a vibe. I love that town. So we went up there and just hung out, and I was so lazy. I couldn't think. I was so burned out from all the different things I had going on and work and the play I did and the mismatch game. I was just like brain dead. On 4th of July, I did hardly anything. I watched 3 movies. I watched Mineshaft, which we just talked about. I also watched Voicemails for Isabel, which is on Netflix. And it's written and directed by Leah McKendrick, who was on this podcast promoting her previous movie, Scrambled. And Voicemails for Isabel is a rom-com, and it hits a lot of those notes, but it has its originality as well, and Leah's voice is in there, and I found myself getting a little choked up, and that was cool. And the other movie I watched was Miss You, Love You. It's Jim Rash's movie on HBO starring Andrew Rannells and Allison Janney. It's set in New Mexico, and I like that landscape because I was raised in Arizona. And they had green chili. They talked about green chili, and I was like, oh, I want some green chili so bad. But anyway, it's a story of this young gay man who is the assistant of this more powerful person, and he goes to help the powerful person, I guess, his mother plan the funeral of the stepfather. So it's basically Allison Janney is this mother, and Andrew Rannells is just like this guy who's there to help because his boss wants him to, or his friend wants him to. Anyway, it's a two-hander, and these two actors are terrific. I thought the relationship was interesting between them. They were interesting characters. And it looked like, I couldn't figure out if like Jim Rash just made it himself and then HBO bought it, or if they put up the money, because it felt very much like an indie that you could afford to do. It was, not a lot of locations. It was kind of like a play. And I don't know, it just kind of made me fired up to like, oh, you can make shit. And it's fun if you get Allison Janney and Andrew Rannells to be in it. But yeah, it's definitely worth watching. I liked that it was a story we hadn't really seen before, and I like when two characters kind of get thrown together and they have to find a way forward and get to know each other. And yeah, I got a little teary at the end, that's for sure. All right, that's enough for this week. Thank you again for listening. I want to thank Oscar Rosario for mixing my episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for Placement Music. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye.